The meeting of the Dudley-Charlton Regional School Committee is now in session for the sole purpose of interviewing the superintendent finalists. It is now in session. It is Monday, February 11th, 2019. We are at the Shepherd Hill Library in Dudley, and the Dudley-Charlton Regional School Committee convenes this evening to interview 2 of our 4 candidates in open session for 1 hour. The schedule for the public interview will be the following: 5 to 6, Stephen Lamarche, Superintendent of Bourne Public Schools since 2010. And at 6:30 to 7:30, Dr. Michael Whaley, Principal of Burrillville Public High School in Rhode Island. Good evening. On behalf of the school committee, I would like to welcome you and congratulate you on being selected as a finalist for superintendent in the Dudley-Charlton Regional School District. Before we begin, I'd like to go over our format for this evening. For the next hour, committee members will be asking you a series of questions, with every member asking at least 1 question. We ask that you keep your response brief, except where a question has multiple parts, as we hope to ask somewhere between 12 and 15 questions within appointed time. If time permits, at the end of our questions, you will be able to provide some closing remarks. Members, before asking your questions, please introduce yourself. We will start from right going down the table, okay? Elaine?
Hi, Superintendent Lamarche, Elaine Rabbit. We met on Friday.
Yes.
Nice to see you again.
Great. It's good to see you as well.
Kathy.
Oh, I'm Kathy Carmignani. Nice to meet you again.
Same here.
Stephanie Reed, nice to meet you.
Nice
No, Pauline Oakley.
Pauline.
Mary Antossi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. You spoke to a number of people in
I
my
did.
district, yes? Yeah.
Catherine Gabriella, welcome.
Thank you.
Jamie Terry, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Okay, so we'll start with Elaine.
So I have a multi-part question.
Okay.
Okay. The educator evaluation process has been in place for several years now. Can you speak to how you utilize the system to develop your educators and administrative team to improve their craft? Can you provide examples of use of this process to help a staff member grow their skill set, use of this process to address an underperforming staff member, use of the process so that the functions within the process, such as observation, is seen as a positive? Finally, how have you set your own yearly goals to address both the needs of your supervisors and your desire for personal and professional growth? What type of support and feedback do you find beneficial?
Whew. There's a lot to that question. Educator evaluation, obviously, as you're aware, is something that came out around 2012, 13, 14, somewhere in that area. It was started to evolve itself. It was really working with the state and with my district. It was really meant to change the culture of evaluation. It was meant to change the culture of teaching and learning within our particular districts, and to try to uniform the approach to evaluating instruction, teaching, and learning within the public schools of the state of Massachusetts. It was really a great instrument, and we in our community adopted it right away. We worked with our association when it came to things like district-determined measures, and with district-determined measures, we really put it in the hands of the professionals within the classroom. We asked them to develop their measures. Now, as we know, district-determined measures have gone to the wayside, but it really served a great purpose for teachers to sit there and say, what are the ways in which I can really evaluate how my students are progressing through the expectations within my instruction or within my classroom as it's associated to the educator evaluation system. Now, the educator evaluation system is obviously very dynamic, has lots of components to it, lots of rubrics to it, and the one I think that a lot of people focused on, which we did as well, is the community connection. How are we connecting to the community within our particular district? How are we, is saying that we're connected to the community just simply by sending an email to a parent is not what the evaluation was intended to be. It was more of, what does the other engagement look like? How do you actually engage with the people that are actually with you in your particular classroom, with the families, with the students that you're teaching and learning? Now, to answer some more of your questions around my own goals and with my district, we base my goals off of the district improvement plan. The professional goal we do as a team, as an administrative team. because we try to bring ourselves together as a district and what we're actually working on. It happens to be around MTSS this particular cycle, and then we work from there. With teachers and how we actually establish it with teachers, we really look at the individual teachers, and we really support teachers who do want to come together and have team goals. It seems to lend itself a little bit easier at the middle school level, which seems to be more teaming, but we do try to bring it departmental as well from the high school level and then also down to the elementary levels. But we really want it to be a collaborative tool, a collaborative piece as far as how we really look at teaching and learning within our particular district. Now, the trick between all of that is that it's also very individual too. So you want to make sure that you're honoring the individuality of the evaluation system for staff members too, and for those staff members that may struggle within a particular area. From a very introductory perspective, we try to look at areas of focus within the evaluation system for ourselves as a district. Doesn't mean that we don't observe or evaluate any part of the evaluation system, but we try to look for areas of focus within that, and we try to work on that on an annual basis through a collaborative process to what should we actually focus on and tie it to our school improvement plans and our district improvement plan as well. For the educator who may be struggling, it's a tool that we use to double back and say, what can we actually do? How can we actually improve upon this? How can we set? Because you get into the directed improvement plans, it has a great system for being very methodical on what steps you should actually take for a teacher who may be struggling within a particular area, and have them be reflective practitioners and really get involved in what they're actually doing through their evaluation system. So the evaluation system to me was extremely dynamic because it covered a wide array of areas for you to take a look at, and it wasn't a checkbox system. And that was really important to us, is that it wasn't checkbox. It actually had some meat to it to say this is what we really expect for teaching and learning within our particular district. And then for students who may be, for staff that may be struggling, you look at how do we work through directed growth? How do we actually work with that individual to better themselves and better the impact they have on students? Now, as you're aware, a couple of things have already changed with the state. I talked about district determined measures. I talked about student growth, within the evaluation system. But the core of what it was trying to do to try to uniform, organize, and try to present a rubric for, because what we're doing is based on a rubric. What we expect students should be based on a rubric of teaching and learning. So to try to uniform all of that and bring it together, and I know that the state's starting to roll out a process of relooking at the educator evaluation system as well as the superintendent's evaluation system to see what can we do to improve upon it. They're going through their reflective practice at this point in time.
Thank
So
you.
you're welcome.
Okay. Okay. What steps would you take to reduce and close the achievement gap among student groups in the district and between the students of the two towns?
Well, first you have to identify what the achievement gap is, where it is, how it manifests itself, whether it's curriculum-based, whether it's assessment-based, whether it's instructional-based. You have to really try to determine where the achievement gap may be emerging from, and actually who falls within those categories of what you would consider an achievement gap. So it's kind of presented generally. I'm not sure if you had a specific population that you were talking about with the achievement gap on that.
I think we're looking more general at this point.
Yep. So again, you want to drill down. You want to try to figure out where that gap is, and then you want to try to be very plan-oriented and methodical on how you're going to address that particular gap, whether it's programmatic, whether it's instruction, whether it's again, I talked about the assessment tool. Maybe the assessment tool isn't measuring it the way you want to. You want to roll out more benchmarking. When I interviewed, I talked about the student growth percentile, and that there was, maybe there may be a miss on some benchmarking at that point in time, but it's so new, it's hard to tell. But really determining where your students are and how they're progressing from one expectation to the next expectation, and then the end run. What is the end goal for those particular students?
And how would you close the achievement gap between the two towns?
Again, without knowing what specifically you're talking about, the achievement gap between the two towns, I'm not sure which one has the gap or doesn't have the gap. My understanding and my belief, I had a wonderful day today touring all the schools. From a 30,000-foot perspective, what it looks like there's an organization need to try to bring everyone together and understand what the differences are between the two entities. It's clearly seen as one district. Dudley-Charlton district is one district, but that there are some, idiosyncrasies or differences between some of the facilities and schools and teaching and learning, and try to understand again what that difference is and try to bring it together. But we really should be, the fundamentals of what we do for students from teaching and learning every day should be equitable across our community, our two communities.
Thank you.
Stephanie?
Okay. As a leader of the district, how would you obtain the buy-in of staff and administration for change or new ideas to bring us from good to great?
Great question. The most difficult thing in our business is change. And change often, the reason why motivation becomes a factor within change is because change is not understood. And the unknown is the death of change in districts. So to motivate, to bring the district from good to great through change, it really has to be an articulated understanding as to what the purpose of the change is, why we're changing, what the process is going to look like when we go through the change, how we're going to be reflective practitioners during change or after change. It really, to bring everybody on board, to get everyone on the bus from good to great. You really need everyone to participate in that process, but it needs to be articulated in some way, and it needs to be thought of all the way through. It's not just change for the sake of changing. Good to great is a great question. From my perspective, Dudley-Charlton is great already. So how we get it to the next step is what my focus would be. I'm a strong believer in continuous improvement. No matter what we do, there's always a little bit more. There's always some more we can add to. We can make adjustments. We need to be true reflective practitioners as to what we're doing well, what we're doing that we may need some tweaking, and how do we bring all of those things together. In doing that, you're honoring the work that's being done. So people are more apt to get involved or welcome change if they already have a sense that they're doing something really well. And it's just tweaking and enhancing. And that's really what the goal, for me, from my, again, 30,000-foot perspective for Dudley-Charlton, it's really enhancing what's going on currently in Dudley-Charlton.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Steve, how important to you are community ideas and parent/community input into the district decision-making? How will you facilitate the flow of information from the district parents and community? How will you facilitate the flow of ideas and critical feedback from parents and other citizens back to the district?
Well, I would start with Facebook page liking and not like, no, just. I would swipe left or swipe right. No, just kidding. Just trying to add a little humor, sorry. We're community-based schools. I mean, the community is critical to your functionality. The example I'll give you is in Bourne, we're opening up a brand new school this year. The original concept evolved because we involved the community. It didn't start that way. We were on our 14th model of what that school was going to look like, but that only came up halfway through the process. And that's because the community was involved in the entire process. We had at least a dozen, if not more, community forums on what that school would look like. So to me, the community is critical. Parent involvement is critical. I mean, do the research. Parent involvement is that entity that really brings students from good to great. I mean, that's what it is. And we know that some families struggle with that. So how do we help those families get involved in it? How do we, I was at Charlton Elementary School, and they were talking about how they have a reading program over there, but there are some families that struggle with making sure that their students are reading, so they have an adoptive reader program over there. That's what we're talking about. That's getting involved in some way. But as far as one of my core values is that there's a voice, that everybody has a voice. Everybody has a value that they can add to what we're currently doing in my district, but also in Dudley-Charlton moving forward. This is a community-based school. And it's critical. If we're going to look at a new safety protocol or something of that nature, it may not be the detail of the protocol. It's important that we have people understand what that safety protocol is and why it's happening, and we would get feedback on that. So the community voice is critical to everything we do.
Thank you.
All set. Steve, can you give us some experiences that you have had as an administrator and outcomes that came from them, and explain how they would help us see your potential as a superintendent?
Okay. I want to say what everyone says, that's a good question, but as I've shared with all the groups today, you say that because you're looking for 30 more seconds to try to process. I could do the strategy of asking you to repeat the question to help me out, too. I've had lots of experiences as an administrator. I've been a strong believer in this profession. I've been a strong believer in pragmatic and practical experiences in this profession. My roles have been from St. Thomas and the Virgin Islands to high school level, to central office administration, to building-based administration, to opening up a brand new school in a community that didn't have that school for 50 years, through taking on a district that was struggling financially and working through all of that. So I've had an incredible amount of experiences. I'm sorry, Mary, you are going to have to repeat the second part of that question for me so I can bring my experiences to your ultimate question there.
Okay. So what I'm looking for is outcomes that came from your experiences and explain how they would help us see your potential as a superintendent.
Okay. It's so wide open. I'm trying to narrow down, an actual outcome. Some of the examples are that we, as an administrator in the Bourne Public Schools, we worked extremely hard with our capital outlay committee and our finance committee to convert a wood lab in our traditional high school, to a innovation studio. We received over $200,000 in capital outlay funding to convert that space so that it would be a PBL space. The evolution of that, this will probably help with the type of leader that I am. The evolution of that, again, came through collaboration. We thought we were doing a great thing, opening up this innovation studio in our high school. There was some resistance, change again. We were changing the wood lab. Everybody wanted the wood lab to stay. The wood lab was, at a point where it was kind of outgrowing its instructional impact. It was mainly only boys that were in the wood lab. We obviously wanted girls to get more involved in some type of hands-on learning or tech. So our high school was a little bit resistant to that. So what we did is we collaborated and we decided to open up the innovation studio to the entire district. And so we had middle school students coming over, we had elementary students coming over, and then then the high school started to see the value in what was coming out of the innovation studio, and that continued to try to, that helped bring that change about. Again, it's such an open question. I'm trying to think of the one thing that you may want to hear or not. No, well, obviously not hear. You don't want to hear anything you don't want to hear. With the new school that we're going into grade span schools next year as a district, and one of the things that we changed, and I shared this with the committee, is we changed bus stops. We changed over 100 bus stops this past year, and that change in itself, although it needed to happen, I learned that the way we entered into it required far more investment than I actually did as a superintendent, and being able to respond to that. It was very personal. It was very personal to families, and so the way I address that is there's a school committee policy that says we need to set up a transportation issues committee, but the way it was structured was my call as a superintendent, and so we set up a transportation issues committee that was well represented, someone from the Department of Transportation, a police officer in town individuals, and through that process they could appeal to me as well. But appealing to me wasn't just appealing to me as a superintendent. It wasn't perfunctory in any way. I would ride the buses, I would go to the bus stop and observe the bus stops, I would talk to the kids, I would interview the bus driver. It was just those decisions, personal decisions, are a huge investment for me, for anyone in my district.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Control is an important element in managing a school district. How do you manage to be in control without being overly controlling?
Can I take the word control and just kind of
Sure.
morph it a little bit?
Sure.
Accountability is really important to
Okay.
me. I'm really somebody who holds myself accountable, and I expect school committee to hold me accountable, and so therefore I hold other people accountable too. Accountability is a huge part of what we do in this profession, and what that accountability looks like and how we roll that out and how we support that is important to understand the human being and understand the humans that are involved in the process of that. So control, I mean, I've not met an educator who doesn't like control at some point in time. But what I think your question may be really talking about is accountability. How do we hold people accountable for, at the end of the day, providing students the best that they possibly can? And so that is a lengthy process, and it's a human process, and it involves open dialogue. It involves being honest. The book Difficult Conversations and having those difficult conversations. But I'm not a micromanager. One of the things that I'm very proud of in the Bourne Public Schools that we did at the same time was we decentralized the central office and brought ourselves together as a district. So the way we did that is that we understood at reform of 1993 that principals have autonomy and are in charge of their schools. So we made sure that everyone knew that a principal was in charge of their school. But at the same time, we kept bringing things together as a district. So the example I gave today to a group was every building had their own staff resource handbook. We came together as an administrative team and developed one staff resource handbook for the district. When we developed the budget, we sit in a room together and we developed the budget together as an entire administrative leadership team. So that develops accountability both at the building level but also at the district level to create what we currently have in Bourne Public Schools.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Let me start by saying I think our district has many great attributes, but we are always striving to be better. So after sifting through a full day of learning about our district and getting to know many on the interview committee members throughout that process as well, what are the first steps that you might take when you were to be appointed in this position? And follow to that with what attracts you to this district.
Great. Well, I made it clear to the group today that I don't own a bulldozer, so I'm not going to come in and bulldoze Dudley-Charlton or anything that I heard today or any of that nature. And I explained that it's very difficult from a 30,000-foot perspective, and I only received a slice of information today as to what I would do for Dudley-Charlton District. What I can tell you from my visit is it was great. It was great. I mean, I was on a treadmill all day today, but it was a fantastic visit. And, ending with the faculty at Charlton Elementary School was great. It was an opportunity to sit down. I did try to explain to them that yes, I am multiple shades of red. That's one thing I can't control. If someone's going to ask me if I have a weakness, one of them is I can't control my redness. It's just who I am. But this district is really passionate, proud, checks so many boxes as to why Dudley-Charlton has the reputation it has as an excellent district. It truly does. And what I would address right after today, I couldn't tell you something after today. It's not fair for me to do. I think it would be inappropriate, and it would have to continue to involve the discussions and dialogue with other individuals to try to understand what would be the first steps. Now, knowing that if I was a successful candidate, I know decisions happen on the first day. There's no, rest area. There's no, sit back and put my feet up on the desk and that kind of thing. So I know that. But as of today, I don't have a response to that. What drove me to Dudley-Charlton and why Dudley-Charlton? As I shared with the groups today, Dudley-Charlton to me is there's a certain aspect of it that's clearly home for me. My wife, I worked in Webster Public Schools. I met my wife in Webster. We married at St. Louis. Both our children, I have a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old, both of them were baptized at St. Louis. We've come back to Webster and to this area. I swim in Dudley Pond every summer. I explained to the groups today that I learned how old I am because after you do tubing, the next day you don't realize how old you are with all the aches and pains that you feel. But what attracted me too, because as I explained to the groups today, I'm not applying for jobs everywhere. You won't find me as a finalist, with the exception of here. And what I also explained is I'm not trying to leave Bourne, I'm trying to come to Dudley-Charlton. Dudley-Charlton represents to me a community like Bourne. It's a community that really has pride in their public education. It's community-based. They roll up their sleeves. They're hard workers. They have expectations for their students, that they're safe, that they're having an excellent education, that they're able to participate in extracurricular activities that are meaningful and valuable. There was so much to Dudley-Charlton that was very similar. And then the other thing that I add on to that too is every position I've taken in my profession has had a challenge associated with it for me professionally. And the one challenge for me here would be that I've not worked in a regional system. I've not worked in a regional system as an administrator or the superintendent, obviously. And to have that challenge of trying to work with what I call 3 municipalities, Dudley-Charlton and Dudley-Charlton Regional, to really try to understand how all of those work is a great challenge for me because I invest in what I do, and I really want to understand it. And I strongly believe my learning curve on that will only add to my leadership for this district.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Elaine?
So Superintendent Lamarche, I'm looking at your
Oh.
district improvement plan.
Okay.
And there were a couple of statements that came up that I would just like you to speak to them for me.
Okay. Typos? Any typos?
No.
Okay.
No, we leave that to Mrs. Kabala.
Oh, okay.
That's her,
Although
she's our red line editor.
Although I've watched the meetings, you're pretty good with math too, so. Oh, I thought you were an English teacher. No.
Math teachers do know English.
Okay, all right.
Right, Mrs. Sargenti?
I thought she was an English major, too.
Yeah.
Teaching math.
My face gets red too, like yours.
So the two statements that I came up under, and they're under the objectives for your advancement and success for all learners. I would just like you to take these two statements for me and give them life and what it means and what I would see as a result of these two statements.
Okay.
Okay?
Can we do one at a time, or you're going to throw them both at me at once?
I'll throw them both at you at once. They're correlated, okay? So the objective is the learning needs of all students drive the operating budget in the school master schedule. And the other objective is the learning needs of all students drive district objectives, professional learning, and student practice growth and goal setting. So how do we take those objectives? What would we be looking for? And if these objectives were met, what would a school committee see as the result?
Well, one of the main reasons for the original objective that you read was that oftentimes when you come into a district, or you look at a district, or you look at what you're doing in a district, sometimes programmatically, or this is the way we've always done it, drives the schedule and drives everything. We don't always do what's best for students, and so that's why that is there. How do we actually do? And that district improvement plan is pre-K to 12. It's not for any one entity at that point in time. So I'm not saying that each one of them, there are pockets of things that are happening between all of those buildings with regard to that. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our students through our scheduling, through our through our programming. Again, we don't want the schedule, we want the kid to drive the schedule, not the schedule to drive the kid, is basically what that first part is right there. Is it easy to do? It's not easy to do. What will accomplishment look like? What adjustments do we make with our master schedule? Right now, we are, because we're going into grade span schools, we're adjusting all of our master schedules, and that includes our high school as well, which is not seeing a change within there, but we're taking the opportunity to look at all of our master schedules and how we can be more student-centered on that part, and addressing the needs of all students, which is under the MTSS improvement initiative that you're talking about right there. The second one, I am going to respectfully ask you to read the second one again, just to make sure I cover it.
The learning needs of all students drive district objectives, professional learning, and student practice growth goal setting.
Yeah, a couple of things, because the budget was in the first one as well. When we look at our budget tells a story. It has to tell a story. What are we doing for our particular students? So our budget has a beginning, middle, and an end. We look at our budget as a story, an evolving story, chapter 2, chapter 3, what's the next year going to look like? Because when you do it that way, you look at, the story can change from one year to the next. So if I always say that I need an extra facilities person, if I keep putting that every year, it gets to a point where, why am I even putting it on there? So you don't want to get into that, so that you want to be able to tell a story through your budget. So the budget process, what drives for students is what do students actually need, and can we base it off of, can we base it off of what students actually need? So that's programmatically from students with special needs to students who are accelerated learners to your average student. We don't want the average student to fall through the cracks. So what are we doing for that particular student? So we're trying to do that through the budgetary process. Now, the second part of that is, and I'm sorry, I'm losing my mind, but if you could just read it one more time.
Sure. The learning needs of all students drive district objectives, professional learning, and student practice growth goal setting.
Right, so the important part with that particular objective is how do we fold the students into the learning practices and learning process. So one of the things we continue to look at is we want students to lead, for example, parent-teacher conferences. We want students engaged in that process and help facilitate that. Not only does that help the student, it helps the teacher to understand where that student's perspective is coming from. So we want students to be part of the process of learning. We want students to be part of the process of teaching and offering feedback. One of the things that I think that we haven't been able to solve yet or really expand upon within the new evaluation system was peer observing, things of that nature, but also having feedback from our students for our instructors. Now, I understand why some of that may have felt offensive to some teachers because you're looking at global student opinions, but it wasn't meant to share with the world. It wasn't meant to put on Facebook or Twitter or something of that nature, but it was meant to provide feedback for that teacher. So student voices are extremely important in their own teaching and learning.
Thank you.
Great. I think this is obvious. Do you use data? And then please provide us with examples of how you've used data to make decisions, plan, budget, or work with others.
Data is both good and bad. Data serves a purpose, and sometimes it doesn't serve a purpose. You certainly don't want to collect data just for the process of collecting data, and unfortunately, that's what to a certain extent. And I'm sure that individuals from DESE aren't watching this, but that's what DESE does. They just collect data, and you don't know why they're collecting all that data. And at some point in time, it's going to come back to us in some way that we never expected. So we don't want to fall into that trap. We don't want to just do data to do data. We don't want to mine data to mine data. We want to serve. It needs to serve a purpose. So to me, there has to be, and you have to continue to work on a system that you collect data for teachers that's only a couple keystrokes away. That's only a couple. I haven't found many districts that have perfected this completely, but you want to give the teachers access to data on their particular students. But it has to be part of their instructional plan and a couple keystrokes away, meaning that they're not spending all of their free time trying to dig up data, because they also have to do lesson planning and all of that, which involves some data, so there needs to be some help with that facilitation. From a superintendent's perspective, a lot of data that we do is around instruction. We're looking at benchmarking, which is something that we've talked about already. I know that you do Renaissance and IKL and all of that, but I'd really want to understand more of what that use of that data looks like. But it can be very informative. And then you do DIBELS too. I mean, there's a lot of systems there, and so how do we actually exercise to use that particular data to inform instruction is really, kind of the key with that. A lot of data that I've done as a superintendent beyond the instructional piece of that has been around if we're going to make a decision on, for example, bus stops, we need to collect data on what the bus stops, what are our ridership, all of that kind of stuff. Again, you need to base decisions off of information. You don't just make decisions. So data can be extremely helpful, not only in the budget process and the decision-making process, programmatic process, and then at the end of the day in the instructional day. But the key to the instructional day is, again, how do you get it to a point where we had learning coaches for a number of years, and so our learning coaches were trying to funnel down all of the data, the instructional data, and try to provide it to the classroom teachers. We've kind of stepped away from that for a minute, and now we're setting up data teams within our buildings to really identify what data is going to be useful for the instructional purposes. But again, we don't want to get to a point where we're just, again, doing data to do data, and we're overwhelming people with the amount of data that is out there and that we're collecting.
Time to go.
Stephanie?
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Our superintendents have always made sure to be known to the students by being present within the schools and activities. I was wondering if you had a plan for how to be connected to our students.
I certainly do, and I am now. One is to live in the community. It's been part of this whole plan, part of the application process. I've lived in every community I've worked in with the exception of Pembroke, Massachusetts on my resume. I explained to the groups today that unfortunately that was the first time my wife and I purchased a place, and it was the last time we purchased a place to live. We bought it at the wrong time, we tried to sell it at the wrong time, and I really want to be connected to the community in which I work in, because accessibility is a huge piece for me. The other thing, too, is to be connected with my own children. Living in the Dudley-Charlton area, my children are involved, my wife and my children are involved in athletics and sports and activities, and to be part of that and be present as a father and all of that. I love the role of dad. I love the role of being a father. I help coach my son's baseball team, his basketball team. My wife coaches my daughter's basketball team, so we're present in that regard. Being at sporting events, I do apologize to some people. My apology is that I don't get kicked out of games, but I tend to be very loud and very positive. I wear the right colors. I don't know if you noticed, but I cheer on my team, and I'm present, whether it's away, home, any of that nature. Performing arts, I love to go to the performing arts events. And it's not about me. It's not about Steve Lamarche. It's not about being the superintendent. It's about understanding and seeing what our students are collectively doing and rejoicing in that. So that would really be a huge part of my presence. The other is to, again, continue down that theme of voice, providing students a chance for a voice, visiting schools. One of the things I really worked on with my staff is when I come to visit a school, and it's twofold. When I come to visit a school, when I enter a classroom, the last thing I want is someone to say, "Oh, let's stop learning. Do you know who this person is?" And the way for me to support a staff member to not do that is for kids to know who I am. So it's unnecessary for teachers to introduce who I am if kids know who I am. So I hate to break up teaching and learning in a particular classroom. I want kids to know why I'm here and that I'm, when I grew up, I never knew my superintendent. I still don't know who my superintendent was. But being in this current culture and this age, people should know who the superintendent is. Students should know who the superintendent is because a lot happens within a particular district.
Thank you.
Steve, we think we have excellent candidates. How can you convince us that you're the person for this position?
Well, I'm tall, I'm red. What I would offer to you is my years of experience and that I've worked hard to be in the position I am today. And I've worked with my administrative team, and they've known for a little while now that I've explained to people I have one more move in my professional career. Again, there's no reason for me to leave the Bourne Public Schools in any way, except for this opportunity came about. And this is a district that I'd love to work in. This is a district I'd love to lead as a superintendent. I love being a superintendent. I love my job. So my experiences, I think, are somewhat unique in some regard. Yes, I have special education in my background and will knock walls down for kids with abilities, not disabilities. There are certain things that I'm very passionate about. I'm passionate about accelerated learners. We rolled out the early college experience program in the Bourne Public Schools. It's exclusive to Bourne. You actually have to school choice into Bourne to participate in the program, and you receive your associate's degree and your high school diploma on the same year. So it's about accelerated learners. It's about creating opportunities. My experience is being in St. Thomas and learning what it's like to be judged based on the color of your skin. I joked with my nickname when I taught in St. Thomas was Milkman and Goat Cheese. Those were my two nicknames for my students in St. Thomas and the Virgin Islands. So, all those that helped. One step at a time, each one of those. Working in Webster Public Schools, taking over as the interim director of special education in Webster when the department was 47 cited in 47 areas out of compliance. Certainly added to it. Opening up a brand new school that has never been opened before. It was originally called Pembroke Middle School. I met with the PTA and said, we can't open up a school that's PMS. We just can't. So therefore, the PTA and myself, we came up with Pembroke Community Middle School, and it was just so much better. The lighting didn't fit the sign, but then we tried to make some adjustments to that. I think it's the experiences. And the other thing that I've shared with the groups today is I love to laugh. I absolutely, I get through a lot of my days through laughter. Education is a real difficult profession right now. There is nothing easy about this business at all. It's very personal. The way social media interacts with our profession right now. We have a generational gap when it comes to digital literacy. We have, individuals who we're trying to establish programs, and I know you are here, about digital citizenship and digital literacy. We have three or four, at least three, maybe two generations that didn't have any of that, but they were involved in social media. And so, we have a real, tight line to walk in public education. So I hope that there's some things in there that would set me apart from, and I'm sure you have fantastic, candidates, and I have read all about them and done my research on it. And I've been watching your school committee meetings as well. So
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's hard for me to ask a serious question after that. But our district is a multi-million-dollar operation. Some would say it should be run like a business. How would you respond?
I would agree that there's a business flavor to it. I mean, you are talking about multi-million dollars. The town expects that there's a fiscal responsibility to running the school system. The towns expect that there is accountability for the finances and for the money that's being provided. It's the biggest public financial program, company, whatever you want to call it, within the two communities. So there has to be a level of accountability around what is expected when it comes to the finances and the district in itself in that business vein. But the one thing that is very difficult for people to understand is it's not always run like a business, because we're talking about human capital, we're talking about human beings, we're talking to people, we're talking about, educators make 1,000 decisions in a day. There are some companies that don't make that many decisions in a year. There are some, flavors of each that are important, but running it, having a leader, having a mission, having a vision, all those things that are involved with good companies. You look at the good companies who've gone good to great that are in that actually in the book. I mean, there's a human capital to that, but what it is, it doesn't involve pre-K to 12 students. And that's the piece that is often misrepresented in running a school system like a business. It doesn't always go together.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How do you keep the school committee informed? In particular, what is your strategy about issues that are your responsibility, but that the school committee would have a great interest in?
Well, first of all, I work very closely with the chair. The chair gets contact on just about anything, and then I take the lead from the chair as to whether I should communicate something out that is more on demand or on the spot type of situation that's going on. As far as things that are, the happenings, what I did early on in the Bourne Public Schools and working forward is I'd send out what I call tidbits. These are the things that are happening within the school system, Dudley-Charlton. These are the things that you should be aware of. If you have questions, please don't reply all, because it's a violation of open meeting law, but please reply to me and I'd be happy to answer you. I've never really used text as a vehicle for talking to school committee members. I have 7 members as well on my current school committee. It's usually a phone call. It's usually an email called tidbits. But to me, the most important part of all of that is I have an open door policy. I expect and I invite and I welcome school committee members individually as two to come and meet with me, call me. One of the things I am extremely proud of and still shocks some people is I answer my own phone. You don't have to go through anybody to get a hold of me. Anybody can call me. Parents, students have called me. If I was there right now, they'd be calling me about tomorrow and to whether it was going to be a snow day or delay or something like that. And I wouldn't really look at social media right now at that as well, because seniors would certainly be requesting, some time off tomorrow. But I have an open door policy, and if you have a question as a school committee member, I would expect you to call me. I like to be direct. I like to be honest. I like to share every piece of information that I need to share. But I primarily work through the chair, and I take a lot of lead from the chair on direct communication. And then when you talk about things that are programmatic or things that are moving forward or long-term things, you're all in. You're all in on that communication.
Okay, good, thanks.
Bear with me while I take my question off my phone. The Dudley-Charlton Regional School District 2018 to 2021 Strategic Plan Portrait of a Graduate details an initiative which embodies an Everybody Matters motto across the district. And so with my question, you kind of already answered how you take the children into consideration there when you spoke about your special education background and your accelerated learners, creative ways to look at that. But if you could take this part of my question, please explain how you plan to ensure it was that every child, I think you've answered that, teacher and administrator are supported in every way needed for his or her success during the upcoming year. And if you have an example of that, so I don't feel like you need to go into the detail about the children, our students, but if you could let me know about how you address teachers in that manner and administrators, I'd appreciate it.
Well, I really enjoyed my time at Charlton Elementary School because Everybody Matters is plastered all over the place. They have a big event coming. They have a big event coming up, I think, this Friday. They have Everybody Matters event. We do Kindness Matters in the Bourne Public Schools, so it's very similar. And it involves everybody. One of the things we did receive in the Bourne Public Schools is a grant through BU, and that's with Kindness Matters, and it's really evaluating. I'm going to touch upon students for a second because I love to do that. Is with our Kindness Matters campaign, you look at individuals with disabilities, especially some that may be more multiple disabilities, and their relationship in the school is excellent. They have peers, they have peer groups, all of that, but when they go home, the social aspect of that seems to drop off. So one of the things we're doing through Kindness Matters, and like Everybody Matters, is we're trying to work on social settings and social processes to try to transfer some of that peer grouping and that peer socialization and friendships outside of our schools. So I just wanted to touch upon that with the Everybody Matters situation. As far as staff and administrators, again, everybody has a voice. So let's start with the administrators first. I've really been a strong believer in hiring within has been our first step in the hiring process. People who are willing to step up and take the risk of being an administrator, but it requires a lot of mentoring as well. So that requires weekly meetings, that requires a lot of time, preparation, debriefing, going through a lot of things. So we tend to do a lot of one-to-one conversations around that, and what their opinion is and what changes they want to make, and we process all of that. One of our practices is, again, if you're coming in as a new administrator, it's not to bring a bulldozer and just bulldoze things. It's really to honor the things that are going really well and look for ways that your set of skills could actually match a growth mindset or continuous improvement. As far as teachers, it's really looking at, what are their ideas? Having a teacher come forward and look at, in Bourne, I happen to be the director of technology as well. Somebody coming forward and saying, I'd like to try handheld devices in our particular classroom. I'd like to write a grant for Verizon Wireless. Can the district match that? That's really supporting that growth, that taking risks type thing. And I think that evolves into Everybody Matters, but it really, it honors ideas and concepts and things that people are bringing forward and have. Now, a lot of superintendent's role, though, is dealt with, people don't usually come with ideas. They come with, this is what's going on in my life and my family, and this I need help, I need support. And that's another way of really ensuring and letting people know that they matter. And I would just end that by, again, talking about the bus stops, listening to parents, but also just riding the bus, talking to the kids, going out. It's everybody matters. Again, things are personal. We're in the human business.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
Do you have any closing remarks?
I do. I want to talk about a couple of things. One is, I'm sorry to inform you, I'm not the smartest man in the room. I'm just not. But who I am today and what I can bring to the table is through collaboration. I wouldn't be the superintendent I am in the Bourne Public Schools and have the successes I've had if it isn't for the team around me. The administrators, the central office personnel, the teachers, and the students. The students, embracing the things that we do. Again, I talked about how this is personal to me. This is I tend to be a very emotional person. I don't know if you picked up on that yet. But I'm an emotional being. I believe in emotional intelligence. I believe that is something that we don't do enough of working with. And I want to bring that to Dudley-Charlton. Not that you haven't had it, but that's who I am as a candidate here. I consider myself extremely, extremely lucky to be here today, to be here tonight, to be given this opportunity, to be considered a finalist for Dudley-Charlton. It really is a district that is just impressive in so many ways. I talked in the past about, with Mass Academy working with Sean Gilrain and knowing that. I used to play basketball in the morning with, Leo Byron and the crew. I've had my own injury from that, and I've finally, I think I hung up my sneakers finally. But, there's so much that I feel that I would really be a good fit for Dudley-Charlton. I would certainly roll up my sleeves. Coming in, every candidate's going to talk about an entry plan and all of that. A listening tour. I'm going to tell you, I'm not coming in for a listening tour. I'm coming in for an understanding tour. I'm going to try to understand every nuance and how the district operates. That's really the type of collaborator and person that I am if I'm the successful candidate here in Dudley-Charlton. Again, I consider myself very lucky. I won't be the smartest person in the room, but I'm human, I'm imperfect, but I really love my profession, and I love my job, and I love being a superintendent. So,
Again, on behalf of the Dudley-Charlton Regional School Committee, I would like to thank you for your interest in this position. Over the next few weeks, we will be completing finalist interviews. The committee is still on schedule to deliberate and select the new Dudley-Charlton superintendent on the evening of February 27th. Should you have any questions between now and then, please feel free to contact the interim superintendent's office, and they will direct the question to the appropriate individual. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Please go.